So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're going to focus over the next around 45 minutes or so, maybe 50, on the topic you see right here. And then we'll take some Q&A as mentioned at the end. And you may hear me muting myself from time to time. I've been dealing with bronchitis. I'm finally over it, I think. But if you see a little pause or hear a little pause, I guess you'll know why. All right, so as mentioned, my name is Dan Wahlin, and I work a lot in the field of .NET, a lot of front-end things, do a ton of Docker and Kubernetes, and we'll talk about some courses you can check out afterwards on Pluralsight that you can get to. But what we're going to do is I have quite a few slides for you. I'm not going to cover all of these. A lot of this is going to be for you kind of afterwards to have something to reference, and I'm going to give you a link at the end where you can get that. But we're going to go ahead and jump in. I will introduce what Docker is really quick, just in case you're new to it. If you're not new to it, it's going to be really quick though, so stick with me. And then we're going to talk about how can we use containers and Docker to actually containerize. That's an official word, I'm told, by the way, the ASP.NET Core applications that you might have out there. And for me, it's everything I do now is containers. Our company applications are 100% containerized. Even our databases we're containerizing now. Now that's, you're going to see as we talk about this more, a little bit subjective. You might have DBAs that don't want to do that, and that's okay. But we'll talk about that too. So we're going to start off with a really quick review, and then we're going to jump right into how do you create custom Docker files. And this is something that is not hard. In fact, if you're brand new to it, it's a lot easier than even learning C#, for example. When the applications you're writing right now, there's a lot more to know there than there is with writing Docker files. But we'll talk about what a Docker file is, and then some commands we can use to take that and then convert it into what's called an image. And then we're going to run that as a container. And then we're going to wrap up with something called multi-stage Docker files. Excuse me. And then based on time, at the end, I'm hoping to show you a little bit. I have this example we're going to run, and this will be up on GitHub for you as well. It's up in Azure. And I'll show you how we can even use something like web apps for containers to run one or more containers easily up in Azure. All right, so let's do a quick review here. So when it comes to Docker, there are a few key concepts we're going to go over just really quick, just in case you're brand new to this. And again, if you've already done Docker before, then this will be a nice review. So Docker itself, this is what it's for, is to simplify building, shipping, and running apps. And I always joke that the first time I saw that, I kind of went, well, I could think of a lot of products that use that type of terminology. But let's dive in a little more. So it provides a shipping container system for code. And it came out of the Linux world, but now with Windows Server 2016 or the latest, the highest, 2019, you can also run containers there. So you kind of have a choice. We're going to talk about that. You can run ASP.NET Core and Kestrel on Windows, like you might be already doing, or you can do it natively on Linux. And we're going to focus a little more on that side today, just because I have limited time. But I'll show you and talk about how easy it is to get on Windows as well. Now, to do this, you're going to be running either Docker Desktop for Mac, Docker Desktop for Windows, or you could just install Docker natively on Linux if you want it as well. Or you might hear Docker CE. That's kind of a slightly older one. It's called Docker Community Edition. But this supports these images and containers. Now, a Docker image, you're going to see, is kind of like a recipe. And since we're all, I think, mostly programmers here, this is something that is a little bit analogous to like writing a class. When you write a class in C#, on its own, it's kind of useless, right? You have to compile it and then actually run it with the .NET runtime. And that's very analogous to what we're going to do. We're going to create these Docker images. Now, an image is going to then kind of like be created or instantiated, if you will, although we don't use that terminology here. But what we're going to do is we're going to take that image and convert it into a running container. So in a nutshell, an image it's a read-only template full of instructions. In a moment, I'll show you a little image, and it's really like a recipe with a layered cake almost. Now we're going to take that image though, push it up to a registry, such as Docker Hub or Azure Container or whatever it may be, and we can then use that to get a running container. Now the container is really nice because, as you're going to see if you're new to this, it has everything you need in that container. So think of a shipping container on a ship, and if I needed to ship my whole house, for example, across the ocean, let's say, and I'm taking a job in Australia, who knows? I would load up everything I need for my house into one or more containers, and then we could run those, we're going to say. Now it kind of looks like this then. Our image is going to be a recipe. So think of a bunch of steps. We call them instructions, and I'm going to show you these coming up momentarily. And we're going to then convert these instructions or recipe steps into this image. So maybe we're going to run Ubuntu, or we're going to run on Windows Server Core, or there's these different bases we can start from. And then we of course need our code in there. We might have certificates in there, configuration, and on and on and on. And that becomes what we call the image. Now this is read only. This is something that once you build it, it's kind of like baking a cake. It's done. Either the cake tastes good or it doesn't. If it doesn't, too bad. Now on top of the cake, a lot of times we put frosting, and we call this the container layer. This is when it gets converted to a container, it creates this readable, writable layer on top of the recipe steps, the instructions. And that ultimately is really the difference between a container and an image. An image is just these base set of instructions, whereas a container is those instructions plus this readable, writable layer on top. Now, do you have to know all that to do Docker? Not really, but it's good to know at least the fundamentals here. All right, so that's our really quick overview of what an image and a container is. So let's keep diving in here a little bit more. So when it comes to Docker and ASP.NET Core, Microsoft already has kind of the base of your cake. It's almost like going to the store and buying one of those pre-made mixes you can get, and then instead of starting from scratch, you're going to use that pre-made mix, and then you might add some extra spices and flavors and stuff like that into it. So they provide Linux and Windows Server images. These are from the Microsoft Container Registry, it's called. Now this is a little bit new. In fact, over the last year and a half, they've changed. They used to host these up in something called Docker Hub. And this is kind of like just a registry, very similar to NuGet or NPM, Maven, those type of things for package managers. But this is for obviously Docker images. And they have multiple images up there that we can pick from. And again, I'm going to show you how that works here. So here's kind of a rundown of what they have. So first off, you'll see this mcr.microsoft.com/.NET Core. That's kind of the base of the image name. And then you have a choice. Are you looking to do something for development, or are you looking to do something for production? Now, if you're looking to, for instance, run ASP.NET Core on a machine that doesn't even have ASP.NET Core, you could totally do that and then use it to, for instance, build your code. So if you're doing a CI/CD system, a lot of people install the actual framework they need on their CI/CD server, continuous integration, continuous deployment, for those that might be new to that. And in doing so, every time they need to update it, they have to update the server. Well, by using images and containers, you literally could just get a new image out there with, let's say you're on 2.2 right now, and you want to move to the latest 3.1 of ASP.NET Core. Well, we could use the SDK image for 3.1, get that container up and running, and we could actually do our builds in that container. And what's so cool about that is if 3.2 comes out tomorrow, let's just pretend, then we could get rid of that one, get the new image for 3.2, and then we're off and running. Very cool. So this is kind of your build and runtime tools, very similar to what you're probably doing today. either with Visual Studio or the .NET CLI command line tool. Now we also have the production version, and this is your .NET Core. It's called ASP.NET, and this is specifically for production. This will not have your build tools. It's not going to have like .NET Restore, .NET Build, .NET Run. It will have because it needs to run it, but it's your runtime only, and it's optimized for production scenarios. So it's obviously going to be smaller, and it's going to be a lot faster than the SDK. Now, if you go to this hub.docker.com link at the bottom down here, this is where you can get information about these, but they're actually stored up probably in Azure in their container registry. It's called Microsoft Container Registry again, and that's where you can get these. All right, so the bottom line to kind of wrap this part up is whether it's Windows or Linux, you actually use the same name of the image. What changes is if you're on a Windows machine, you can choose to run Linux or Windows. And we'll kind of dive into some demos here, and I'll show you a little bit of that. Mostly, we're going to focus on Linux, though, today. Now, you can also, if you have Visual Studio 2017 or higher, you can very easily enable Docker support. You can containerize your ASP.NET Core apps. In fact, if any of you have some good old web forms apps out there, you can even containerize those apps, which means you would be able to move that old app onto pretty much any Windows server you wanted that supports containers. Now, we're not going to have time to go into that aspect, but I want to throw that out there, that this is not just for .NET Core and ASP.NET Core. You can containerize anything, pretty much. Node, databases, Python, and you name it. Now, let me jump over real quick to my Windows side here. And I've already created, at least got to the start screen for a ASP.NET Core 3.1. This would be a Razor Pages app, or we could do MVC. And you'll notice right here, take a look at that, enable Docker support. Now, right below it, you'll notice that I can also pick Windows containers. And on a Windows 10 Pro machine or higher, as long as you have Docker Desktop running, down here in the corner in our tray, you'll see my little Docker icon. So once you've installed Docker Desktop, you'll get this, and then once it's up and running, you can actually right-click, and if I wanted, I could switch to Windows containers. And now I could do everything I'm going to show you coming up here. In fact, it would be an identical process, even though I'm going to show Linux today. It would be an identical process for the Windows containers. And that's how you would switch. And then if you want to switch back to Linux, you could. And you could even run Windows containers and Linux containers at the same time, not only on your machine, but also on Windows servers out there. All right, so that's kind of how you would get started. Now, I'm going to show you a little more from scratch of how to do this. So I'm going to cancel out of this. And we're going to jump over to here in just a moment, and I'll show you the basics of getting started with a simple example. And then we're going to wrap up a little later with something called multi-stage builds. All right, so this kind of walks you through whether you're on 2017, which this shows, or I just showed 2019, you can do this. You'll notice right here on 2017, if you're still on that, we have enabled Docker support. Once you check that, you pick your OS and you're off and running. Now, what that's going to do is generate some of these files that we're going to talk about momentarily. All right, so moving along here. Now you can also do this. If you have an existing project, and again, it doesn't have to be .NET Core. It could be an older web forms app if you wanted. You could actually right click on that project, and you do have to have 2017 or higher, of course, with the latest updates. And you could go to add Docker support. Now this will add in these files that we're going to talk about, although we're going to cover them from scratch again. But then you would be kind of off and running, and now you could actually run and debug your project right here in Visual Studio. Super impressive what they've done there if you haven't tried it. Now, if you're starting a new project, I'd recommend do what I showed with 2019 just a moment ago, or if you're on 2017, just check this box, and that'll get you all set up. You don't even really have to know what you're doing. Now, I'm gonna be real sort of to the point here. If your company's not ready for Docker and containers, don't start deploying your app with containers. because containers are phenomenal. I love them. I use them for everything now. In fact, I don't think I'll ever go back to the old way of deploying code. But I have worked with many companies because I run a consulting company, and in going in, sometimes they're ready for this, sometimes they're not. So make sure that your admins, your IT admin, your DevOps, all that kind of knows about this. Now, that's probably what we call preaching to the choir there, but you get the idea. So let's jump in now to some of these files here that we would have. So what we're going to do is we got to build this recipe. I just met someone last week from a company. It's a cable type company for TV and internet that's based where I'm located in Arizona. And I just talked with them about one of their projects. And he actually went to culinary school. So technically he could be a chef if he wanted, but he got into software. Probably a good move, I think. But we were talking about it, and he learned how to do all these fancy recipes. He could cook up pretty much anything, it sounds like. Now, I didn't get to taste his food, but I'm guessing he's pretty good. That's very analogous to we're now the chef, if you will, and we need to create this recipe to build an image. And we're going to do that with a Docker file. Now, the Docker file then is going to be run through a command called docker build, although I'm going to show you an alternative way that's even easier than this. And that's going to create this image that we can use, this Docker image. Now, here's an example of an ASP.NET Core, really, really simple, kind of one of the most simple things you could possibly do, actually, with a Docker file. Now, you'll notice right up top, take a look at the first two items there. All right, and you'll notice that right off the bat, we have that mcr.microsoft.com .NET Core SDK. Now, that again is the name of Microsoft's image for the latest, which in this case would be 3.1 .NET Core. Now, under that, you can then add these instructions. Now, each one of these, the label, these are environment variables, port information, what directory in the container, and then what command to run to start this all up. These are all instructions. If you remember earlier, I gave the analogy of a layered cake. Well, each of these becomes an instruction for the layered cake. So right now we have what, 2, 4, 6, 7, it looks like, that we can have. Now, because we're using the SDK, this is obviously not optimized for production, but what we can do is set up, and I have a little info down here about this, but we could set up what's called a volume. We could actually make it where once we run this, it could point to our source code, and we could actually do live development against .NET Core without ever installing .NET Core on our machine. Now, I'm not saying I do that or you should do that, because I think most of us are going to have Visual Studio or VS Code with .NET SDK installed on our machines, and that's going to be normal. But you literally could do development against an ASP.NET Core image or container, set up this little, it's kind of a file folder pointer, call it a volume, back to your code, and actually run your code in that container. Super, super cool. Now, in this case, what we're doing, though, to go back to the instructions, is we're going to say, what's the base of the cake? Okay, what's the base of this recipe? It's the SDK. All right, we got to know who to blame, I always joke. So in this case, we're going to blame Docker Joe. All right, who created this, in other words? Now, we're going to give two environment variables here. So take a look at those real quick. All right, now the first one, I'm overriding the default port. Now, .NET Core and ASP.NET Core specifically with the SDK and runtime uses port 80 inside of the container. Now, I'm overriding that here by saying, no, don't use port 80, use port 5000 in this case. Now, you may or may not do that, by the way. This is just an example of how ASP.NET Core will look for this environment variable, and if it sees it, now it's not going to use port 80 inside of the container, it's going to use port 5000 on any IP address, by the way. That's kind of the plus. Now, the one below it, you've all probably seen. This is where we could say, are we in development, staging, production? What's our environment? Now, again, we're going to expose port 5000 inside of the container, and we're going to set up a working directory here of var www app. Now, that's just a path I made up, but it would create that folder structure inside of the actual container here. Now the final thing is the command that you see. Notice this is a Linux, you can tell because we're doing bin/bash. -c means run a command, and then the command is going to be .NET restore. So we're going to restore our NuGet packages, and we're then going to run the actual application. So if you've ever used the .NET CLI before, you probably recognize those commands. Very analogous to doing a package restore in Visual Studio and then hitting F5. That's kind of what we'd be doing there. Now you'll notice there's no code here though. Well, again, the information here at the bottom says this assumes that we'd create this kind of pointer from the container back to our source code. And although we're not going to have time to cover that aspect today, I have plenty of examples up on GitHub if you want to check that out, or you can go check out the Docker docs. All right, so let's dive in a little bit more here. So there we go. We have our SDK build, and then we're going to restore packages and run the application. Very basic Dockerfile to get us started. Now, if you've used dotnet-watch before, you can use that inside of the Dockerfile. Notice back here, we just said .NET run, but we could put .NET-watch run. And then if we had our container pointing back to our source code through this thing called a volume, every time we change the code, the Kestrel server would automatically restart. That means you don't have to stop the container, rebuild your code, start the container. You just leave it running, and every time you make a change, the watch would catch it. And that's kind of what this is talking about. So there's a link here if you're interested about .NET-watch. Some of you using Visual Studio probably aren't using this. Some of you probably are, but it's kind of nice if you want, and this is what would change. So notice first off the environment variable here. Now the second one is notice the .NET-watch run that you see here at the bottom in the command. Again, now every time we change our local code, it would cause the Kestrel server running in the container to automatically restart. Very, very cool. All right, so that's kind of the basics of this. Now let's dive in a little bit more here. So once we're done locally or on a CI/CD server or something like that, we of course need to build for our release build for production, in other words. And now we don't want to use the SDK because we're now ready to go to production. Maybe you're moving to Azure. Maybe you're moving the container on-prem to a data center you have. Who knows? Well, we can of course use the .NET publish, and then for the configuration of the release, that's the -c, we could say release, and then the output folder of our DLLs is going to be dist in this case. And that's where everything would be copied. Now this command is going to be something that a few of you may run this right from Visual Studio. Nothing wrong with that. Some of you may automate this through a CI/CD server. Everybody has a different build process, so you need to pick what works for you, but at some point you're going to have to run this, whether it's through the UI, the GUI, or just a command. Now let's assume we've done that. Now I'm going to give you a second. Take a look at this Docker file and see if you can catch really quickly some of the differences here. All right, now you probably very quickly saw that we have a production version. Notice it's not SDK now, it's ASP.NET. You might also notice down at the bottom, we have a copy command. So we're going to copy from, let me go back real quick. Remember we said dist right here was our output folder? What we're going to do is copy from that folder into the working directory of what will be the container. That's that var/www/app. So imagine we have a ship on a container. We're going to take your furniture from your house. We're going to copy that, I guess you could say, into the container so we can ship it. That's what we're doing right here. Now the working directory is mainly the directory that's in the container. And then the copy command here is simply copying our DLLs and the associated files into, and then see the dot right here? Well, I could have typed var www app, but this is a shortcut because I already said what the working directory was here. Now, the last piece is, notice that we've also said the DLL. In this case, our project was not a great name, ASP.NET Core and Docker, but notice our entry point it's called. Okay, and that's kind of like our main, if you will. Before we did a command to run our .NET restore, .NET run, but in this case, because it's a production image, we can get away with this type of scenario. Now, again, I've used 5,000 for the port. You may not do that. You don't need to do that. You can leave it as 80 inside the container. And then outside the container, you would probably talk on port 80. So the end user would call your domain with no port 80. And that would then forward the call inside of the container, in this case, to port 5,000. But again, the default is 80. Really, this is here just to show you that if you want to override the default, you absolutely can. And that's what we've done here. All right, now I've already shown you how to switch to Windows containers, and the Docker file for Windows actually looks the same. The only thing that might be different, you, instead of running like sh or bash scripts inside of this, you might actually run PowerShell, for example. That would be different on Windows, but you could also run PowerShell on Linux nowadays. So that depends. All right, so there's an example of that. And then here's the production one. Now notice it looks almost identical to what we just talked about. Really, really close. There's a few things I changed up. Okay. So that's an example of some really basic Docker files. So before we go any further, let's go ahead and we'll get through this part of it here. Let's talk about how to build it, and then I'm going to jump for the rest of the time for some demos. So one way we could convert that Docker file and the instructions that we have is we could run a Docker build command. Now, you've all done this as developers, just not this way. You've written a C# class, and then you've said, you know, customer equals new customer. But before you can new it up and create the object, which would be like the container, what do we have to do? Well, we have to build, of course. And that's what this is doing. So we could say Docker build, and then we could give it what's called a tag, basically a name for the image of the recipe. And in this case, I called it .NET, and then I gave it a version of 1.0.0. Now, versioning, or the tag name here, really, really important. I just rolled out some new containers 2 nights ago to Azure for some stuff we're doing. And I always version them. And here's why. If something goes haywire, something goes wrong, it's really easy and quick to revert back to another version. Because remember, the container has everything you need. And as long as that image, that recipe for the old ones, is still up in your registry, Docker Hub, local registry you have at work, or Microsoft Container Registry, or Azure Container Registry, I should say, then you can always go back to that version. So it's super cool to be able to roll things out. And if something does go wrong, which unfortunately does happen on occasion, then we can kind of roll back to the previous version. I don't have to redeploy old code. I just redeploy and, excuse me, basically tell it to run this specific version. Now, right now, maybe this is the first version, 1.0, but down the road, we obviously may change that. All right, now the dot there is where is your Docker file? So in this case, we're saying the Docker file is in the same folder. Okay, we're kind of good to go there. Now, once we've built the image, we can then run it. And I'm going to, again, show you a different way to do this. It's even easier, but this is how the raw type of command line syntax would work. We would say Docker run in detached mode. That's the -D there. And then I'm going to give the container a name of .NET. Not a great name, but okay. Otherwise, it's going to come up with kind of a wacko looking name, or it has an ID you can use. Now, how are we going to call this container? You'll notice that we have 5,000, 5,000. You can see up here, the external port that a user would call would be like localhost 5,000. The internal port running in the container is also 5,000. Now, a lot of times this might be 8080 because the default of a ASP.NET Core image is 80 these days. Didn't used to be, but it is these days. And then you're probably going to have the user call it on port 80 as well. So it's kind of like you tell the user, yeah, call me on my cell phone at 5,000. That's your number. But then when they call that number, it turns out that forwards the call to your other cell phone, which is also 5,000, but it's a different brand. Maybe this one is iPhone and this one is Android, who knows? That's kind of what we're doing here. Now you'll notice we then say, all right, well, what is the image that we want to run? In this case, we're saying our .NET 1.0 or 1.0.0 I had, whatever it is, that would go right here. Now from a developer standpoint, let's go back real quick. This is like doing a build in Visual Studio or a .NET build if you use the CLI. Okay, so that's what this is doing. But instead of building DLLs, we're building the recipe, the image. This is like doing a new customer, if that was your class, or in this case, new .NET. But we could tell it what version of the image to use, what version of the recipe, because you might have a lot of recipes, old ones and some new ones out there. All right, so now that we've seen that, let me go ahead and, well, here, let's just keep this in full because then I can do this. All right. Now this is a project that you'll have that's up on GitHub. It's a pretty simple ASP.NET Core app. And I have a really simple example of the SDK. Now I didn't set up what's called a volume on this case. This time what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the SDK. I'm gonna run on port 5000 in this directory, and then I'm gonna copy my local source code here into the working directory of what will become the container. And then we're going to expose port 5000, and then you've already seen these commands. I'm going to do a restore and then a run. Now, I could do this. I could do the docker build -t some name, some version. Okay, this is the tag it's called. And I could say dot, although in this case I can't do dot because you'll notice over here I didn't call it Dockerfile. So I'd actually have to do, there's a -f for file, and I have to give it the name and do all this. Now, let me show you a little trick here. I'm in VS Code because in this example, I'm on my Mac. Now, this other one over here, I'm in Visual Studio. Okay, but so you can do either. And just to please the dark theme lovers, you'll notice I have dark theme here for you, and we got light theme over here. So I'm gonna try to keep everybody happy. But okay. So in this example, I need to run that docker build command, which I've already run, by the way, but I could do this. If you are somebody running on Linux or Mac, and you're just using like VS Code, you can install the Docker extension. And the Docker extension will let you see all your images, any containers, any registries you have, networks, and some other stuff that we won't have time to get into. But what's nice about it is this. If you don't want to memorize the docker build command, I can right click and say build image. And that would actually build the image. It's crazy. So if I click on this, we could say build image, and it's going to say, what do you want to call it? Well, if I wanted to call it my app 1.0, I would put that and hit enter. I'd be done. It would generate the image. So I'll go ahead and show you real quick. And there we go. It just built an image. And now if I go back, we should have a my app in here somewhere. See if we can find that. There it is right there, 1.0. There we go. There's our recipe. Now I could even come into here and run it if I wanted. Now I'm not going to do that because we don't really need it, but that's what you could do. Now this one I don't need, so I can also right click and remove it. And now it's as if obviously that never happened. Pretty cool. All right, now that's kind of one way you could build these, or you could use what I showed in the slides. Now another way, which we're going to use, is this. So this is a Docker Compose file. What you're going to find is after typing about your 100th Docker build command, you're going to go, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. It's like too tedious. So you can create this YAML file called a Docker Compose file. Now, the key thing I want to show you here is right here, the build. The context is look in this local folder where the Docker Compose file is. And then the Docker file I want to use to build is ASP.NET Core Dockerfile. That's the one we just looked at. That's this one. Okay, so what I can do now to build this is do the following. I could say Docker Compose build. And you can add, you'll notice I also have a Postgres database option in here, which in this case, it's not a custom image. It's going to pull one from Docker Hub. I'm going to run the app here in just a little bit. But what it would do is I could put in as many of these as I wanted. If you're doing, for instance, microservices, you could have, microservice 1. This is called a service right here, this web. Microservice 2, microservice 3, whatever it is. And then with one command, you could build all of your images. And notice the image here is ASP.NET Core app. Give it a better name, by the way. Now, if I do that, which I've already done, so I'm not going to do it again here, it would then go in and generate an image. And if we come in, I'll show you that image real quick. It's right here, right there, ASP.NET Core app. About 2 hours ago, I ran this command to build it just so I didn't have to worry about any surprises. And now it's kind of ready to go. Now, I have the image. How do I run it? Well, I showed you earlier, we could do Docker run, detach mode, port, give it a port, maybe 8080 to, remember it was 5000, name of image, and all this other stuff you could do. Again, that gets pretty tedious though if you have a lot of containers. So with Docker Compose, I can instead do the following. We could say Docker Compose build, and we could say Docker Compose up. Or just to show you, you can even, if you have this plugin installed for VS Code, I could right click and say Compose up. Very, very cool. Now I'll go ahead and just type it in this case. I've abbreviated Docker Compose because I get tired of typing it as DC on my machine. And I'm going to say up. And then, oh, I'm in the wrong folder. So let me go a little bit deeper here. So I need to go into the subfolder. And now let's try that. So let me just type it out the first time so you see it. So we say build and then up. All right, we'll let this run. Now let me switch back because I am going to have to get out of here. And now this will take a second to get going, but let's go to localhost 5000. Okay, it's already going. So if I really quickly, let me show you what it did. So this now started up. Postgres should be up top here somewhere. Okay, well, I ran out of room on my console, but at the very top, you would have seen Postgres. I then insert some seed data into the database. I'm just using Entity Framework Core here, nothing fancy. And now it's running. And if we search here, it'd be port 5000 you would see, but you'll see that right here. Now, this particular app has kind of two parts. I have an MVC app, real simple, but this hits the database. And then I have an Angular app, a SPA app. So you can edit and do all this stuff kind of live right here. But this is all running in the container at this point. Kind of cool. Even the database in this example is running in the container. In fact, let me kind of prove that to you. Let's open up a new command prompt here. And if we run docker ps-a, you'll notice I have my ASP.NET Core app and my Postgres. All right, so that's kind of the start of this. Now, how do I stop all this? You say up to bring it up and down to bring it down. Now, that's going to look at the YAML here and basically take down the web and the Postgres containers. Now, if I say docker ps-a, this is how we can list all running containers or stopped containers, actually, either one. There's nothing there. It's kind of empty, you'll notice. All right, pretty cool. Now, just to prove that was working, let's go back to here and can't get to the page. All right. Now, the last thing we're going to cover is we've only seen some really basic images so far. Let's talk about what you can do, though, for reality, real life. So one of the things you can do is create a multi-stage Docker file. Now, this would be when you're ready to go to production typically, or you want to go to staging or something like that. The first thing you're going to do is in the Docker file, you're going to have the SDK because you still need to build your DLLs. Now, what we're doing here is we're not using Visual Studio. We're not using our local system. We're actually going to use containers to build our ASP.NET Core apps. It's super cool. In fact, if you're doing CI/CD systems, you could do this as well. Now, what we're going to do is use the SDK to build it, that'll create an intermediate image, it's called. You won't really see this, but behind the scenes, it will create this cake. Then we're going to take the output of that, which would be the DLL or DLLs it created, and we'll copy that into the runtime version of the final image. Now, here's what it looks like. So we're going to avoid manual creation of images, and instead of all this complexity we used to have to do, we can copy in from stage one, which would be our build process, the output of the build into the runtime, and that's going to lead to a smaller runtime, and everything's just like, it's like running one command and you're doing everything you need. So let me show you what it looks like. All right, so take a look at this real quick. All right, so you'll notice right up top a new little item here, as build. So we have the SDK. We're going to copy our CS proj into a working directory. So we have app/ASP.NET app, and then we're going to run .NET restore. Okay, that's going to get all our NuGet packages, of course. Then we're going to copy in the rest of the code into here. Now I'm assuming on my local machine I have this folder called ASP.NET app. And then we're going to run the .NET publish to the out folder. Now this is all being done in the SDK, but we're going to alias that. We're going to give it a name, if you will, of build. Now from here, what we can do at stage one, as you see, is we can then take the output of that and copy it into a production version. This is stage two of the build. And what this will do is now take that from build, copy that DLL or DLLs, whatever there is, into the folder locally, which is called app in this case. Okay, notice the out was the output of our build. So we're going to go to that folder from this build container and copy it into this container. So in essence, we have ultimately two images that are really being built here. One does the build, the other is for production. Now, what's nice here is Visual Studio, if you check that Docker checkbox I showed you, it'll generate something like this. So if you're going, if you're really new to this, going, oh, there's no way I could remember this. Well, guess what? Neither do I. I've done this enough that I can copy and paste from myself, or I know how to do it in Visual Studio. So kind of up to you on how you want to do it, but don't feel like you have to memorize this. This is something that it's out there. And even the project I'm going to have for you, there's different projects that have this in it. All right, so that kind of wraps up that part. Now, before we stop, though, I'm going to show you something real quick here. So you're going to notice that I have a production version. Well, not that one, this one. And this might ring a bell. This is actually the multi-stage build. So everything from, let's see, what do we have? Everything here. Okay, that's stage one. Here, that's for production. So now if I did this, I could either type it. Now you'll notice I named the Docker Compose file, Docker Compose prod.yaml for production, we'll pretend. Well, in this case, I'd have to do this. Okay, so we have Docker Compose -f, and then I would have to say build. Now this would go in then, go to this Docker Compose right here, and notice it's going to use the production version of the Docker file. Well, that's the one we just looked at. This is the multi-stage build. All right, so we'll let this run. It should be pretty quick because I've already run this, so it should be cached. And that's one nice thing you'll see with Docker is once you've done a build, it only rebuilds the changes, the diffs. So it's really, really fast the next time you run it. Okay, and then if I wanted to run this locally, we just change that to up. Now again, notice I'm putting -f because I don't want to run the SDK version. I want to run the production. So I have to give it the appropriate Docker file or the Docker file and the Docker Compose file. We'll say up. All right, there we go. And then we'll have to give it a second. Well, it's actually already up. It's super fast. All right, this time I'll open up Chrome and we'll go to localhost 5000 and give it a sec. There we go. And now we have the Angular app that you see here, and then we also have the MVC app. Kind of does both just to demo this. All right, pretty cool. And then we can Control C, and I could say down. All right, and now it's as if it never existed. Very cool. Now I could have also right-clicked on here with the Docker extension for VS Code, the plugin, and we could have said Docker down and Docker up right here. Really, really cool. Now, the last thing I want to show you is if I push, which I already have, this image I just made. In fact, if we go take a look at our images, all right, you'll notice I have one called Dan Wahlin ASP.NET Core because my alias up in Docker Hub or my user account is Dan Wahlin. So what we can do now is push that up to Docker Hub. Now, the way you do that is it's called Docker push, and then you give it the name of the image. So I could have done this. Now I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it again, but this would now push the layers of that recipe, the layers of the cake, up to Docker Hub. Or I could push to Azure Container Registry or AWS or Google Cloud. It doesn't matter, any of those. All right, now once you've done that, you could now grab that image. You could do Docker pull that image down and run it. But I want to show you the last piece here to wrap up, that I went to Azure and I created, in fact, let me just show you how to create this from scratch real quick. So I have a, excuse me, a resource group here called Sandbox. And if I click add and then select containers, I could do container instances, but I'm going to do web app for containers because this has a pretty interesting feature. It's still in preview, and it has been for a while, but it's pretty cool. All right, so if I go to here and then give it a name and all that fun stuff, I can now deploy code or a Docker container. This is just a web app service. If you're using Azure, you've probably done these before. I'd have to pick all my VMs and all that fun stuff here, but I'm going to go to the next one, which is Docker, and show you this. Now, instead of running a single container, I could say, nope, I want to run multiple containers. Pick this, Docker Hub, and then I could upload the Docker file that I have, which is right here, Docker Compose Azure. Now, I've already done this to save time because it does take a second to get it set up. So let me exit. And I have one right here called ASP.NET Core App Demo. All right, and I literally just did what I showed you. I have the instructions for this in the README, by the way, if you're interested, of the project, which I'll give you a link to. Okay, when I click here, which I've already opened, notice this ASP.NET Core App Azure Websites. This is now the same exact app we just talked about, but now we're up in Azure. Pretty cool, and it literally took me about 5 minutes to do that. Now you might say, well, why not just deploy the code, Dan? Just use a regular web app. And if you're not using containers, I'm all for that. Okay, but if you're using containers, and we could go on and on and on about the benefits of containers, but that's maybe another webinar. The nice thing here is I can easily run multiple containers without having to be an expert at what's called orchestration. Now, the next level up from that is called Kubernetes or Service Fabric, and that's beyond the scope of this webinar, but that's what we could also do. Now, what's so cool about all this, like our entire company website, the blog, the actual training and sites, in fact, I even have for videos, I even have my Pluralsight stuff in here, you'll notice. This is all containerized. Even the databases, we have Postgres, Mongo, Redis, and then we have the application servers. So I think there's around eight containers, something like that, not that many, running. But this entire website is using everything we just talked about to do this with containers. And I mentioned I just pushed out some things a couple nights ago. Now, luckily it went perfectly. I didn't have to do anything. But if it messed up, I could easily go back to a previous version. Really, really nice. All right, so to wrap up, I'll stick around for questions, but here is a link to the slides right here at the bottom. So once this, there we go. once this does its thing, I'll let you take a look, and then we're going to wrap up because I'm going to show you some more links here really quick. I'll give you a sec to write that down. Okay. And then the project we just ran is going to be in the slides. So I'll go back to the slides to wrap up here so you can get the link if you didn't. But this very first link, that's going to be the project, and there's a README that'll walk you through everything I just went through over the last 50 minutes or so. There's also a bunch of other projects if you're interested. Everything from containerizing even spas like React or Angular, Node.js, all kinds of fun stuff. So check that out if you're interested. And then on Pluralsight, if you're interested and want to dive much deeper into this, I have a course called Docker for Web Developers. Highly recommend you check that out. And then I have 2 brand new ones that just came out if you really want to go to the next level. And that's a new learning path we have called Kubernetes for Developers. So I'll let you look at that if you're interested. But all of this info can be accessed through this link right here. All right, so with that, let me see if I can make these questions a little bigger, and we'll do some questions. So is there a way to containerize Windows service running in the background? Yeah, you could actually containerize all kinds of fun stuff, and that container just runs like a job, for example, in the background. Now, normally in that case, it probably won't be a Windows service though, because the whole goal of containers is as long as that container stays up and running, it just runs in the background natively. But you could do any task you could want with a container if you wanted. For example, let's just say you created a console project in .NET Core, not ASP.NET Core, just .NET Core. You could containerize that project and do that. Now, when it comes to services, I have not created a Windows service, which is your question, in a container. I suspect that probably works. I'd have to look into that, to be honest, because I would just myself just create a regular container though. That's their goal in life. The nice thing with containers, they can be set up so if it crashes or goes down for some reason, then they can be set up to automatically restart, kind of like a Windows service. All right, how can we start Linux and Windows containers at the same time? Yeah, to do that, I won't be able to demo all of that, but what you would do is, I didn't show it, well, no, I did show it on Windows. So I'm actually running the same exact app on Windows here, same exact thing. And a little bonus tip for you. For those on Windows, if you haven't checked out, you can go to the, if you're on Windows 10, you can go to the Windows Store app and install this guy. It's not 1.0 yet, but it's called Windows Terminal. It is just awesome. You can customize everything. You can have animated, well, I call them GIFs, but apparently it's GIFs, running in the background and all kinds. But look at this. I can now switch, hey, I need a command shell. Okay, boom, your wish is my command. Hey, I'm running WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. Look at that. I can now, it'll take a sec to get this going because I haven't run it today, but yep, there we go. I'm now in Linux on Windows. Or if I wanted PowerShell, which I'm already in, or Azure Cloud Shell. So anyway, if you're interested, it's called Windows Terminal. I love it. It's a lot like what I'm used to doing on Linux and Mac, actually. So it's really, really nice. So check that out. Now, to your question, right now I'm running this, if I go to the Docker icon, on Linux. Now, let's say I left this running and then I switch to Windows, okay, which I can do right now. It'll take a second to restart. Now, what this would do is the Linux containers are still going to be technically running there. Now, you notice this got kind of messed up, but that's just because I changed. So this, well, once this is done, now I could come in. Now, let me go back here. Yep, there we go. So see how it says switch to Linux now. So now I could come in, start up a new command prompt, run a container on Windows, and we could actually talk between the two. There's a little networking that goes on in Docker. That's beyond the scope of what I can go into, but that's how you would switch. Now I could do like a Docker compose or a Docker run, whatever it is, if I have that container here, and then we could actually talk between those. Pretty cool. And then if you're on, at some point you'll have to move those containers to your server. Well, fortunately, especially Windows Server 2019, the newest one, It makes it so you can do that very easily. But you can also do some of that with Windows 2016. 19 is where you'd want to go though on that. All right, what's the difference between Docker containers and DevOps IIS manager? Okay, so containers are like the shipping container I mentioned earlier. All the stuff your app needs goes in that container, not just the code. Your framework, your settings, environment variables, configuration, everything you need. Those are the main things. Security settings, all that can go in the container, okay? Versus DevOps, DevOps could be used to build a container or build an app, deploy the app, all that fun stuff. That's more your DevOps, but DevOps isn't really your runtime. Containers are a way to run a server directly, but without actually having to install that server on the machine. In fact, the VM you're running the containers on, they don't have to have .NET at all. In fact, you could run Java with .NET, with Python, with PHP on the same machine in containers and never install any of those frameworks on your VM or if you have a actual server on your server. So a big difference. Now, IIS manager, that's just going to manage your IIS. That's not containers at all. So very, very different there. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Is it possible to have source code to play with? Oh, yeah. So you probably asked that earlier. And yeah, the answer to that is go to this link, which gets you to this link. And that's the demos I ran. Okay, Dan mentioned being able to containerize legacy apps. Yes, I want to confirm this. Yes, you can. Let me show you really quickly how that would work. Well, here, let me switch this back really fast. All right, so let me get that switched. Okay, so now we're back to Linux. And this we can actually close. So let me do this just to show you. If we did a new project and we did an ASP.NET, we'll call it legacy at this point. And you pick your framework version here, whatever that is. I'll just leave the default here. Hit OK. Now I could pick like web forms or an older MVC, MVC 4, 5, 6, or well, it only goes up to 5, but web API, whatever it is. I'll say web forms, and then notice this, enable Docker Compose support. Now, I'm not going to do this because it'll take a sec to actually generate it, and there's a big image. Now, this will have to run an IIS image. So there'll be an image that literally has the IIS server. It's Windows Server Core, if I remember right, is the default. I don't really use that one much, but it will have to download that, and that's a big one. Most images are pretty small. That one, I think, is 1.5 gig or something like that. It's pretty good size image. Okay, but once I download that, I could actually run my project in that container, build the image, deploy that image to wherever I want, Azure, on-prem, anywhere that has Docker support with Windows containers, and then I could run that web forms app or MVC, whatever it is, inside of that container. It's a great way, a true story. I know of a company that literally put a chain link fence around one server in their data center, no joke. And the only way you can get in is you have to have the key to unlock the bolt, the deadlock, or whatever it is, the lock. And you might go, are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. The reason is that server was so important and such a house of cards that they couldn't afford anyone to touch it except for one admin person. So they literally locked it up in a chain link fence. Now, I haven't talked to them for quite a while, but they're more than likely, hopefully, considering containers for that, because now they could, whatever that app was, they could containerize it. Depends on how old it is technically, but if it was .NET, and then run that. So excellent question there. Yeah, can you run in the cloud? Yep, you would have to have Windows Server that's capable of running Windows containers. So like I said, 2019 would be the best option there. 2016 has, I'd have to double check which service pack or update or whatever they call it, but I believe that had some support for that. But again, I'm mostly working with Linux now. Okay, can containers also help college students? Yeah, so containers could help my mom if she was a developer, but she's not. They could be used for any project where in a matter of minutes, I need to take what's running now on my machine or your machine. I want to move it to the cloud. I want to move it to a data center. Yeah, because now all I do is push those images that we talked about to the appropriate spot. And again, check out the Docker for Web Developers course because I go through all this in detail. But shameless self-plug there. What about persistence, uploaded files? Yeah, now that's where volumes would go. So Salvatore, hopefully I'm saying that right if you're still on. Volumes are a way for a container to actually not save the data in the container. Okay, by default, all data gets saved in a container, and if that container dies, your data dies. With a volume, you can actually have this kind of folder pointer, I like to call it, that the container actually points to a folder on your host, or it could be a network location or even a cloud location, such as Azure Blob Storage, Azure Files, stuff like that. And now as the container saves like log files as an example, you don't want those in the container because if the container crashes, you wouldn't be able to get the log files if they're custom log files. So yeah, the answer there then, Salvatore, is it's called a volume. Please discuss ASCII application logs. Yeah, so logs themselves, let me do a DC up because I think I still have everything here. And oh, no, I don't want that one. That's my big one. That would take a while. Hold on. We're going to take that down because I probably just tried to start up a ton of stuff. Okay, no, I hit it in time. All right, so let me go back to what we had for our demo. All right, so I'll show you a couple ways. First way is the easiest. Once you're in, let me do DC up here. And we'll start this. I need to go to the subfolder. Oh, no, I'm in the wrong one. Hold on. I got too many VS codes going. And that's the Kubernetes. There we go. Now we're back where we were. Okay. So let's do DC down. So I think I have that. Okay, good. It's already down. Let's go back up. Now, I didn't start this in detached mode. Now, this is the logs, by the way. I didn't start this in detached mode. Let me show you how you would kind of do that. Now, what detached mode is normally you don't want to stream the logs like that. Okay, normally you just want to start the containers, and then if you want to get to the logs, let me show you how you can do that. So if I type it out, Docker compose, and then I'm going to do up-D. That means detached. Now, see how it gave me my console back? I don't have my logs now. No big deal. I could either do this. So if I do Docker ps-a, that lists my containers. Now, notice this container right here, df1. That's my ASP.NET Core. I could say Docker logs df1, and now I can get to all my logs. Okay, so Docker logs, or you could do Docker compose logs. Now, this is going to give you everything if I do this, but I could even go to my web service that I have. That's the name of the Docker compose service. But this would stream all the logs you could see. Now, if it's on the file system in the container, which I wouldn't recommend, that's where the question earlier, you set up a volume, then in that case, you'd have to do what's called, and I'll just show you the basics of this. I got to remember here. Docker exec IT, name of the container, BF1, I think it was, SH. Okay, I didn't type that right, but anyway, it'd be like that. You can basically get into the running container. Let me see if I can find that really fast. Oh, df1. All right, now I'm literally, see this command prompt right here? I'm literally in the container. Now you'd have to be on the machine, of course, to do this. But now I can do commands, and here's all my stuff in the root, because this is my working directory. So this is my DLLs and stuff. Now I could run .NET commands, although this is a production image, so you're not gonna have, I can't do a build from here because this is inside of the container and it's an ASP.NET production image, not an SDK. So there's a couple options. You can do Docker logs or Docker exec. Okay, can I use Docker in yeah, I'm doing that right here actually. So what you have to do there's a couple ways. Let me see. I'll tell you what. I can give you the better way to answer this is just to give you a link because this is some setup work. I got to remember where I put this. I think it's under WSL, and I will chat this to you because this one is not just give you a quick. Yeah, here we go. This guy named Nick, I don't know how you say his last name, but he has a great post on Docker and WSL. I actually went through this, so let me just paste this in. Did that send? No, it did not. I'm gonna put this in the chat for us. Are you able to send that to them? I don't know why, but it's, oh, never mind, you can't hit enter. Okay, you have to do send all. All right, there you go, check that out. And yeah, so if I jump over here and go back, when I go to my Ubuntu, this is WSL. You can do this with 1 or 2 on Windows. For those new to this, you can basically run Linux on Windows natively, if you will. It's kind of behind the scenes doing some magic to make that happen. So now if I do like docker ps-a, look at that. There's my containers that we're running, but I did that through PowerShell. Okay, well now I can use the subsystem to get to it, but there is some setup work involved, but it's not hard. You just have to plan on about an hour at least. Okay, how do you handle configuration? Like if the container should use different external APIs? Yeah, now that's gonna be up to you. You could put the config in a volume. So in other words, you could have an external folder that the container knows about, and then using normal file directories in the container, you could pull that config. That would certainly be one option. The normal option for config though, especially in the cloud, is we use environment variables. Is on the VM that's running these containers, we'll put that config info into the environment. Now this assumes it's not dynamic, of course. And then we can get to the environment variables just using normal ASP.NET code. And that'd be the normal way to do it. If it's dynamic, you're probably gonna have set up an API, and then your app would have to call that API to pull in that data dynamically. The container, once it's running, that part's not gonna change, but environment variables absolutely could be used as the container starts up and things like that. Can I refer my database to the connection string inside the container? Yes, you can. You would use, in fact, if your database is not containerized, it's just a normal server out there. Maybe you have a DBA that runs it, and you're not going to put it in a container, but you have .NET Core wants to hit it. Yes, you could. Now, as a heads up, there is going to be, it depends on where you run ASP.NET in that case, because if you're using integrated security, which a lot of us do for internal apps especially, and you're not doing passwords, in that case, if you're on Linux, that's a little more work, just to be real honest up front with you. I'm trying to remember the files. I think they're called tab files, if I remember right. There's a little bit of work you'll have to do to integrate with Active Directory in that case. It's definitely easier on Windows containers because obviously they can natively talk to Windows or Active Directory. Now, if you're using username password in your password or your connection strings, then yeah, you could give it the IP address or the name server name on your network for like SQL Server or Postgres or whatever it is, and just hit it like normal. But if you're using integrated security, I'll just give you a heads up, there'll be a little more work involved with that. Kind of a one-time thing though. Could you share your bash prompt, the one you have on map? See, oh, I'm using ZSH, it's called. Yeah, so you might notice some kind of cool coloration here. So if I CD, let's see, where am I? Yeah, let me CD into desktop, for example, and then demos. So yeah, this is called ZSH. So if you just do a search for ZSH, it's the default on Catalina now. But to get what I'm doing, I have a theme installed for that. And yeah, unfortunately, that'd take me more time to explain, but just go look for ZSH themes. And if that's what you wanted, you could do that. I'm trying to remember the Agnoster. It's like this, Agnoster, I think is the name. In fact, I'll put that in the chat. I've just tweaked it a little bit. All right, what if my .NET Framework app needs Windows features? How to configure the Docker image? Okay, so if it needs Windows features, you're probably going to need a Windows image. If it's in Linux, then it's not going to be able to access, Windows features, obviously. Now, keep in mind that when things run in containers, they're pretty isolated. That's a good thing. With Windows containers, you have two modes. You have Hyper-V containers. They're super isolated. Like they are super secure, super locked down. They can just talk to themselves and anyone on the network that's a container. Whereas regular Windows containers are a little more flexible in what you can do. So the bottom line is, yeah, if you need Windows features, the Linux containers, I'd have to see your scenario, but they may not work for that. But I'd have to see your scenario. How does data persist between deployments? Yeah, so if you containerize a database, so like this website right here, this is right now this is hitting MongoDB, and then we have Postgres and we have Redis for caching behind the scenes. But obviously, if the MongoDB containers, because I have actually multiple for redundancy, if they crash, what would happen to my data? And the answer is it would be gone. That would be bad. So have backups. No, you need backups, but that's not the answer. That again gets back to the previous question on volumes. So Dennis, you'd have to set up a volume from your database container that the data files and the data log files and all that fun stuff would have to be written out somewhere that's outside of the container. And if you just do a quick search on Docker container database volume or something like that, lots and lots of posts, lots of examples out there. I probably even, some of my examples I put in the slides here at the end, I probably even have. Again, just go to this link right here. Okay, I think we're almost at the end, although a few more came in. So we'll cut off questions. We'll do these real quick, and then we'll get everybody out of here. Can you just use an Angular app in a Docker container? Yeah. I personally, for my Angular or React or Vue or whatever you're doing on JavaScript or TypeScript, I don't run those with ASP.NET Core. Now you might say, why? I could. Now this demo I ran here, yeah, I'm hosting that in ASP.NET Core in the container. I prefer to use something called Nginx, or you might have heard of HA Proxy. There's lots of options out there. They're designed for static files. This app is dynamic, but there's another one out there. You won't be able to get to it. It won't do anything for you unless you're logged in anyway. Yeah, you'd have to log in. But this is a really big Angular app. And I run that in Nginx. Why? Because Nginx is designed to be kind of like a CDN, a content delivery network, in the sense that it's really fast at serving up static files. Now, could you use Node.js or ASP.NET Core or Java? Absolutely, because all those servers obviously can serve up JavaScript and things. I would recommend, though, look at some of these servers that are designed to serve up static files. It's going to be really fast. So anyway, Nginx, I'll type that in here if you haven't seen the spelling. Highly recommend it, but it depends on your company, Sarah. Docker for VS allows local images or remote as well. Both. Yeah, you could. You'll have to run it locally. So if you have an image that's out there and you want to run it on your machine, then you're going to have to pull that image to run it, because you have to have that image local in Docker in order to do a Docker run. But yeah, technically, Salam, you could get that remote image and then use it local. That's the whole promise of Docker. Can Docker containers authenticate? Okay, yeah, I just covered that earlier, Bill. That one's some work if it's Linux. Yes, though, they can. You have to set up these files. I'd have to dig up the post. Unfortunately, I don't have it handy, Bill. But if you search for maybe Active Directory Linux containers, there's a guy from Microsoft that did a blog series, and I'm not even sure if I bookmarked it, but I know it's out there. And he goes through how to set up. And again, I don't do this that part every day. I think they're called tab files, if I remember right, Bill. If you're doing Windows containers, it's obviously easier though. But yes, you can. I was working with a big defense contractor here in the US, and they wanted to run Linux containers. and we got it working, but there was some work to get it. It's just one of those one-time things, though. Once it's done, you know what to do. Can you recommend a site to learn more about, like for dummies? You're not a dummy, Roberto. Come on, that's a good question, actually. So first off, you know, I'm hoping you have access to Pluralsight, but if you don't, I'll definitely give you some. So if you go to docker.com, if you go to, let's see, I need to remember here, docs. Under products, you'll see docs, or developers, you'll see docs. Okay, they actually have a getting started, and they have a quick start. So I would recommend go through this quick start on docs.docker.com. I'll put that in the chat for you here. And that way you'll be able to kind of really get started for the basics. Now, from there, there's a ton of books. Again, ton of video courses out there. I'm going to shameless self-plug mine, Docker for Web Developers, but you know, and you could use the Pluralsight has a free trial, and you can actually check that out if you want to. So that's what I would recommend. Is go through this first, because this is like extremely, I mean, literally, I think they even call it Hello World. Let me see here if they still do. Maybe not. Maybe they used to have. Now they changed it. It's bulletin board, but yeah, it used to be Hello World. So, all right. Can environment variables be changed without having to restart? Let me think about that. For the container, no, I don't think it will by default. With Kubernetes, yes, but not with just regular Docker. Now with your app, of course, yes. But normally once it's started and the container is running, if you change that environment variable, you wouldn't want the container to change. You want your app code to react to that. That you could do, but you'd have to code that, of course, to monitor the change. I'd have to see off the top of my head, Wade, I don't remember a way to do that with containers. You can when it starts up, of course, but after it changes, not that I think of. Linux key tabs, that's it. Thank you very much, Wade. Yeah, I was thinking tab, it's key tab it's called. Are banned by your security group. Yeah, then I'd have to look into other options there, Wade. That one, fortunately, I don't have to do it quite as much, but it's something you definitely have to look into. Now, the post I mentioned, let me really quick see if I happen to have that. I don't know what I would have put that under. I have a ton of bookmarks. And then we'll wrap up here. Yeah, I don't see it right here. Let me see if it's in here, possibly. No, it's probably in like an ASP.NET Core or something like that. So like I said, I'd have to dig, because off the top of my head, I don't remember where I put that link. I know I did bookmark it, but it's been a long time ago. So yeah, I'd have to dig into what their recommended guidance would be there. Unfortunately for me, I don't have to set that up every day. But yeah. So all right, well, I hope that helps. You know, we got through, I think, all the questions. Obviously, there's a lot to get into here. So Roberto, for you, for example, since it sounds like you're really new, and I suspect we have others, don't be afraid of it. It's not hard, I promise you. It's one of those things that I remember when I first got started. I got started about 5 years ago now, and it felt like I was just swimming in the deep ocean and I was going to sink. But then as those concepts started clicking, I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. And it's like anything, you know, it feels advanced until you get the hang of it. And then you're like, oh, this isn't that hard. And it's honestly not. Now, are there some more advanced things you can do, like the thing, Wade, we just talked about? Yeah, I mean, that can get more advanced. Now you have to know, for instance, more about Linux commands. Now, if you're using Windows containers and you just know DOS or PowerShell, you should be good to go, though. Because for the person to ask about Windows features, you can run PowerShell commands to, for instance, install Windows features into a Windows container. Very common when you, for instance, use IIS in a container, because you might need extra Windows features. You could totally do that. But in Linux containers, obviously you're limited to Linux. And when it comes to things like Active Directory and others, yeah, I'd have to dig a little more on that one, because that gets a little trickier. But don't let it scare you. Check out some of the resources I mentioned, and we'll go from there. So to wrap up, let me actually put this link in the chat, and I thank everyone for your time. It's been great to, I'm gonna just, on the last question here, just gonna send that to everybody. And that'll be the link here. So thanks a lot, everybody, and thanks again, everyone at Pluralsight, for having me.